Michael Grant's day had begun like any other. The alarm clock buzzed insistently at 6:30 a.m., pulling him from a dreamless sleep. He lay for a moment, staring at the ceiling of his modest suburban home, listening to the soft hum of his refrigerator and the distant chirping of early birds. Everything was ordinary, nothing remarkable, yet in the recesses of his mind a storm was brewing, a storm he had spent years keeping buried. By 7 a.m., Michael was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for his two children, Emma and Luke. He moved with precision, frying eggs just the way Emma liked them, cutting Luke's toast into perfect triangles. His wife, Claire, chatted about the day ahead, oblivious to the tension in his eyes. He smiled, nodded, even laughed at the joke she made about the dog. Outwardly, Michael was the model husband and father, ordinary, dependable, unremarkable. Yet beneath that calm exterior, there was a dissonance, a quiet unease that had grown heavier over the years. The family dog barked at the front door, and Michael paused, staring at the window. A news alert flashed on his phone. Unsolved murder revisited. Police seek new leads after 5 years. He swiped it away, but the headline lingered in his mind. He had been thinking about it for weeks. Tonight, he told himself, everything would change. The commute to work was uneventful. Michael drove in silence, gripping the steering wheel with just enough tension to hide the storm inside him. He noticed the usual sights, the familiar strip mall, the coffee shop where he bought his morning latte, the traffic light where he always paused. Normalcy, he thought. But the world outside was irrelevant. Inside, he was consumed by the inevitability of what he had decided to do. At work, Michael's demeanor was as impeccable as ever. He greeted his coworkers, answered emails efficiently, and completed his tasks with clinical precision. To them, he was simply Michael Grant, reliable, competent, and utterly ordinary. No one noticed the subtle trembling of his fingers as he typed, or the way he occasionally paused mid-sentence, lost in thought. No one could have guessed the weight he carried, the memories of crimes meticulously committed, carefully hidden, and never detected. By late afternoon, Michael excused himself from the office under the pretense of an early appointment. The streets were bathed in the warm golden light of late afternoon, ordinary people going about ordinary lives. He felt a strange serenity as he parked his car near the police station, a calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the truth he was about to reveal. The police station loomed before him, unremarkable and sterile. He walked through the revolving doors with an almost casual step, as if he were simply there to ask for directions. The receptionist looked up, smiling politely. "Can I help you?" she asked. Michael's voice was calm, neutral, but there was an undercurrent of gravity that made her pause. "I need to confess something. Everything," he said, his words deliberate, almost rehearsed. The receptionist blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Confess something? Everything? "Sir, could you clarify what you mean?" she asked. Michael took a deep breath and said nothing. His eyes were steady, unflinching. The calmness itself was unnerving. The receptionist picked up the phone, calling the nearest available officer. Within moments, Detective Laura Chen appeared, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for handling delicate situations. "Sir, can you step into my office?" she said, motioning toward the door. Michael followed without hesitation, the click of his shoes echoing in the hallway. Once inside, he closed the door behind him. The office smelled faintly of coffee and paper, mundane and safe, yet the tension in the room was palpable. Detective Chen gestured toward a chair. "Please sit. Can you tell me what this is about?" Michael sat, his posture calm, almost casual, as if discussing the weather instead of the confessions that would soon shake the entire city. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper, yet commanding attention. "You think you know what evil looks like. You don't. Not until you hear everything, and then you'll understand why I had to come here, why I had to confess." The room held its breath. The ordinary man sitting before them was about to unravel a web of deception, manipulation, and murder that would leave the entire city questioning everything it thought it knew. And with that, the ordinary man named Michael Grant began to tell his story.
Detective Chen sat back in her chair, heart pounding. The words Michael had spoken hung in the air like smoke, thick, choking, impossible to ignore. Her instincts screamed at her to doubt him, yet every detail, every pause, every measured tone of his voice told her this man was not bluffing. Michael leaned forward, his hands resting on the polished oak desk, fingers intertwined. "You want proof?" he asked quietly. "I can give it to you, but you must listen first. You need to understand the full story before you can see the evidence." Chen's pen hovered over her notebook. She nodded cautiously. "Go on," she said. "The first crimes, burglaries and arsons." Michael's voice was calm, almost soothing as he recounted his first crimes. They began small, break-ins targeting homes where he knew no one would be home. He described selecting houses meticulously, observing the comings and goings of residents, noting security cameras, timing patrols. Every theft had a purpose beyond money. He wanted control, the rush of evading detection, the thrill of being invisible in plain sight. Flashbacks unfolded in Michael's mind, and through cinematic description for the audience. He watched the camera angles, noted the blind spots, and slipped in through unlocked windows. Once inside, he took only what he needed, leaving subtle signs to mislead any future investigation. A shoe left in the hallway, a drawer slightly ajar, a faint fingerprint on a mirror. Each detail carefully calculated to confuse, delay, and frustrate law enforcement. Then came the arsons, small at first, fires designed to destroy property while leaving no human casualties. Michael described the meticulous planning, the accelerants, the timing, the placement of objects to delay discovery. He spoke with a clinical detachment, describing the thrill of watching flames devour a building he had selected, knowing no one suspected him. Chen shivered as she realized the level of premeditation. These weren't random acts of vandalism. They were exercises in control, in manipulation, in dominance over law and order. And Michael had done it for years without detection. The escalation, murder. Then Michael's tone shifted. He leaned closer, eyes locking with Chen's, and the room grew colder. "The first murder," he began softly, "wasn't a mistake. It was necessary. You call it evil. I call it survival, my own, and in a way, everyone else's too." Chen's stomach twisted. She had seen murder cases before, but the casual detachment in his voice was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Michael described the victim, a man who had unknowingly stumbled upon evidence that could have exposed one of Michael's earlier crimes. He didn't want witnesses, and he didn't want mistakes. He had studied the victim for weeks, noting routines, habits, vulnerabilities. Every detail was precise, almost surgical. The flashback painted a cinematic scene, Michael following the man through dimly lit streets, the quiet hum of a city that was oblivious to what was about to happen. He cornered him in a deserted alley, words exchanged briefly, too late for mercy, too late for reasoning. Michael acted decisively. The act was quick, calculated, devoid of hesitation. Then came the cleanup. He destroyed evidence, manipulated the scene to mislead investigators, and left nothing behind that could tie him to the crime. Chen noted mentally the names of the cases that had gone cold. Could Michael be telling the truth? Manipulation and the police. Michael paused, letting the weight of his confession sink in. You've been chasing me for years, and yet I was always one step ahead. Every misstep, every false lead, every theory you had, I knew it. I studied your methods as much as you studied me. You think you're clever, but I was watching. He described in unsettling detail how he manipulated police investigations. Anonymous tips, planted evidence, and careful misdirection had ensured that every case seemed solvable, yet eluded closure. His words painted him as both criminal and puppeteer, controlling the city from behind the scenes while living a facade of ordinariness. Chen's mind raced. She felt equal parts horror and fascination. How could someone so ordinary execute crimes with such precision? How could he maintain a normal family life while committing these acts? And most importantly, why now? Hints of a larger plan. Michael's tone softened slightly, almost reflective. I've been planning this confession for months. Every word I speak, every detail I give has been carefully considered. I didn't walk in here on a whim. There's a reason, and that reason ties to the first crime, the one that started it all. That's the story you'll never forget. Chen leaned forward, sensing the trap. And why should we believe you? Asked Chen. Michael's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Because I'm going to show you proof, but you won't understand the full truth until I've told you everything. He paused again, letting the tension hang in the air. Flashbacks of his minor crimes faded, replaced by glimpses of the city at night, the homes he had entered, the buildings he had set ablaze, and the one alley where a man had died. Every scene was eerily ordinary on the surface, yet tainted by the knowledge of what had really happened. Foreshadowing the next revelation. Michael's words grew darker, more unsettling. The first murder, it was only the beginning. Everything that followed, the arsons, the thefts, the manipulations, were connected. There's a pattern, a design, and by the time I confess the final crime, you'll see it all, and it will make you question everything you thought you knew about right and wrong. Chen felt a chill. The ordinary man before her had turned into something almost mythic, someone who had walked among us unnoticed while leaving a trail of destruction that would have shattered anyone else. Michael's eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. There's one last crime, detective, the one that started it all. That one changed me, and I need you to understand it before this confession is complete. Tomorrow, when you reopen the files, when you see the evidence, you'll know why I came here. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand me. Chen's pen froze on the page. Her mind raced through unsolved murders, cold cases, fires, and thefts. Could this man be responsible for all of them? Was he confessing for redemption, or was there another, darker reason for walking into the station? Detective Laura Chen's fingers hovered over her notebook, frozen. Michael Grant's confession had already upended everything she thought she knew. He had admitted to minor thefts, calculated arsons, and a chilling murder. But now he was leaning forward, eye steady, voice calm, and ready to reveal the crime that had started it all. It's time you understood, Michael said, his voice quiet, deliberate. The first murder, the one that changed me and the city itself. It wasn't impulsive. It was inevitable.
Chen's pulse quickened. She had reviewed files, scoured cold cases, and consulted colleagues. Nothing had ever linked Michael to any unsolved murders, and yet here he was, sitting across from her, speaking with an unnerving calmness. The setup, the first victim. Michael leaned back, letting the weight of silence stretch for a moment. Then he began describing the man who would become his first victim. He had been ordinary, someone the city would never have expected to be targeted, a minor witness to one of Michael's earlier burglaries. The man had noticed details that Michael could not risk being exposed. Michael's description was chilling in its precision. He had watched the man for weeks, studying his daily routine, the grocery store he visited every Tuesday, the quiet alley he passed on his evening walk, the times his neighbors were away. Every observation was methodical, calculated to eliminate risk and maximize control. Flashbacks unfolded like a dark cinematic montage. Shadows stretched along deserted streets as Michael followed the man, silent, invisible. He studied his route, noting every surveillance camera, every potential witness. The ordinary cityscape, the streetlights, the late-night cafe, the barking dogs, was transformed into a web of tension and threat. Michael recounted the night of the murder with chilling clarity. The city was quiet, the air crisp and still. He cornered the man in a deserted alley, the faint hum of a distant neon sign casting long, distorted shadows. There was no struggle, no hesitation, only calculated precision. Every motion was deliberate, the grip on the weapon, the timing, the removal of any traces that could identify him. "You have to understand," Michael said, eyes locking with Chen's. "It wasn't about anger or rage or revenge. It was necessity. Once he saw too much, there was no turning back, and I couldn't risk leaving any loose ends." Chen felt a chill run down her spine. The calmness with which he described killing a man was terrifying. Yet the methodical planning, the attention to detail, the control, it was almost professional. The flashback continued, Michael disposing of evidence, carefully erasing fingerprints, and planting false clues to mislead the investigation. He even manipulated digital records, ensuring the man's last movements would seem inconsequential, untraceable. Manipulating the investigation. Michael paused, letting the tension build. "Do you know why you never found me?" he asked. "Because I wanted you to think you were close, only to realize you were chasing shadows. Every dead end, every misstep, every theory, it was all part of the plan." Detective Chen's hands clenched into fists. The audacity, the sheer hubris of it was almost unbearable. Michael had not only committed the crime, but orchestrated the investigation to make the city's best detectives doubt themselves. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "I studied you, your colleagues, the patterns of law enforcement. I knew what you'd see, what you'd miss, and how you'd interpret each clue. And now, after all these years, you're here, listening to me confess everything." The words hung in the air like smoke. Chen's mind raced. Could anyone really plan so meticulously? Could someone live a normal life, maintain a family, work a job, and still orchestrate murders without detection? And more importantly, what was his end game? Michael continued, revealing a side even more unnerving, the psychological manipulation. "I didn't just want to kill. I wanted to see how far you would go, to see how the system reacts when someone is clever enough to outthink it. The fear, the confusion, the frustration. It was fascinating." He described subtle signs he had left, animus tips, staged break-ins, misleading witnesses. It wasn't about showing off. It was about control. I wanted the city, the detectives, even myself, to believe in order while chaos lurked underneath. Chen's heart pounded. She felt trapped in his narrative, like a spectator forced to watch a masterful performance of crime and manipulation. And in some ways, she was, because he was controlling the story, controlling her perception, controlling the truth. Michael's voice softened slightly, almost reflective. The first murder, it changed everything. Once I understood how far I could push the system, I realized there was no limit. Every crime afterward, every theft, every fire, every calculated act, it was part of a larger design. And now, after years of evasion, I am here to make sure it all comes together. He paused, letting the weight of his confession settle. Chen's notebook was full, but it felt insignificant. The man before her had orchestrated terror in ways she had never imagined, and she knew the worst was still to come. Then he delivered the final chilling statement of the session. Tomorrow, when I tell you about the next series of events, the crimes that followed the first murder, you'll see the full scope, and you'll understand why I had to walk into this station today.
The room was silent, heavy with tension. Detective Laura Chen could barely breathe as Michael Grant sat across from her, calm and composed, like a storm that had already passed but left destruction in its wake. After confessing the first murder, the minor crimes, and the manipulations, he now leaned forward with a faint smile. "There's only one thing left," he said softly, "the part that brings it all together, the consequences, the truth about why I walked in here today." Chen swallowed hard, her mind racing through every cold case file, every unsolved arson, every theft, and every detail that had haunted her over the last 5 years. Could one man truly be responsible for all of it? She doubted herself for the first time in her career. The grand revelation. Michael began recounting the events following the first murder. Each crime he committed afterward was connected in a calculated chain, a web designed to manipulate not just the victims, but the investigators themselves. He described the arsons that had forced emergency responders to chase fires across the city, spreading panic, leaving communities exposed. The burglaries, minor on the surface, were strategic distractions designed to keep attention away from the more significant crimes. Then came the chilling confession that tied everything together. He had chosen his victims and locations with psychological precision, observing not just patterns of life, but patterns of fear. He had tracked how news spread, how rumors formed, how investigators approached crime scenes. Each action was designed to push people into false conclusions, to create illusions that were impossible to see through until now. Chen's pen moved frantically, but the notebook couldn't hold the weight of what he was saying. The meticulous orchestration, the audacity, the cold logic, it was almost unimaginable. The psychological masterpiece. Michael leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. "I didn't confess out of guilt," he admitted. "I confessed because I needed someone to see it, someone to understand the pattern. It's not enough for it to exist in shadows. And now you understand." He paused, letting the gravity sink in. "I've been studying you too, detective. I wanted to see how far you could go to solve it, and now you know how vulnerable the system really is." Chen felt a chill. This man, this ordinary-looking man who smiled as if nothing mattered, had been manipulating the city and the very people sworn to protect it for years. And the final confession wasn't just about his crimes. It was a mirror held up to law enforcement, to society, to everyone who believed in order. The hidden evidence. Michael then delivered the proof. He gave precise locations of hidden items, journals detailing his crimes, incriminating photographs, cash stashed in secret compartments, even a weapon from one of the murders, perfectly preserved. Detectives went to the sites and retrieved the items. Each piece confirmed the confession. Every manipulation, every misleading clue, every unsolved case that had haunted the city now fit together like a sinister puzzle. The city had been living under a carefully constructed illusion, and Michael had been the architect. Families of victims received closure, though the revelations were horrifying. The man who once seemed ordinary was revealed as a calculated mastermind, someone whose intellect had been used to orchestrate fear and death. The family fallout. Even Michael's family was shaken. His wife, Claire, sat silently in their living room, unable to reconcile the husband she knew with the man who confessed to multiple murders, arsons, and manipulations. His children, Emma and Luke, stared at him with confusion and fear. He had been their father, their protector, and yet he had lived a double life, hiding unimaginable darkness behind an ordinary mask. Michael admitted to the detectives that he had calculated every move in his personal life as well, ensuring that his family remained unsuspecting. He had been a devoted father and husband, not out of love, he said, but out of necessity. His life outside the crimes had to appear normal to avoid suspicion. The true motive. Finally, Michael revealed why he walked into the police station that day. He said, "I wanted to force reality. I wanted the system to see itself for what it truly is. You spend your lives chasing illusions of control, believing criminals are obvious. I walked in here to show that ordinary appearances are deceptive, that darkness can hide behind a smile, a suit, a normal life. And now you know." Detectives were left speechless. The confession was more than a revelation of crimes. It was a psychological challenge, a confrontation that forced them to question their assumptions about human behavior, morality, and justice. The arrest and the calm after the storm. Michael was arrested, calm and collected. He walked into the holding cell with the same ordinary demeanor he had maintained for years. His hands were cuffed, but there was no panic, no anger, no regret, only a faint smile. "You'll see me differently," he whispered to Chen as he was led away. "You'll never forget this, and perhaps you'll question your own sense of right and wrong." Chen watched him go, unsettled. Michael Grant had done something no one could have predicted. He had confessed, revealed, and manipulated all at once, leaving the detectives and the audience haunted by the enormity of his crimes and the brilliance of his strategy. The final twist. Even as he was taken into custody, Michael hinted at unfinished business. He said quietly, "I've given you the truth, but there are still questions you haven't answered, clues you haven't interpreted, shadows you haven't seen. Perhaps one day you'll understand the full scope of what I created." Chen felt a shiver run down her spine. The ordinary man had been extraordinary in his cruelty and intelligence. The city had survived, but the scars, both physical and psychological, would linger forever. Outside, life continued. People went about their days, oblivious to the man who had manipulated them for years. But those who knew the truth, the detectives, the families, the city's undercurrent of fear, would never forget.
Michael Grant had confessed everything, yet in doing so, he left an unsettling question behind. Who else could walk among them, hidden in plain sight, shaping fear while wearing a mask of normalcy?